So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there, YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. I am here right after scripting the mega series of AIG Canada giving me homework, and I needed a break from young Earth creationists. So today we're looking at Mud Fossil University. That's right, it's time for Roger, the man who thinks caves are vaginas, can't tell the difference between intestines, a penis, and a rock pillar, and who thinks that more or less every single statue everywhere is secretly hiding a body of a giant inside. As you can probably see from the title, we're going to see what he thinks of the Great Flood. You know, the worldwide flood that we know for a fact never happened, but that some people seem to think did anyway. Before we dive in though, I'd like to remind you to like this video, leave a comment, and share it outside of YouTube. YouTube likes to not let channels grow unless viewers do those things, and I'd like to grow the channel. Without further ado, here's Roger.
Okay, my wonderful friends, this is going to be a very tricky subject.
I expect nothing less.
We're going to be talking about the Bible.
Kip Davis would hate this. He's a well-known Bible hater.
Which everybody knows that book, to some degree or another.
Well, not everybody, but I bet anybody who's watching Roger, so fair enough.
However, there's other books written in other cultures that simulate their feeling of how the origin of the universe started. And they had their own gods that could do similar things to Christ and things that are talked about in the Christian Bible.
Roger has discovered that other cultures exist. I feel like he came to this realization a bit late in life, but I'm glad he figured it out.
But like this, there's three essential Maya sacred texts: the Popol Vuh, Chalam Balam, and the Maya Codices.
I feel like if you can't say codices, you might not be the person to tell me about Maya mythology, but this is Roger. Expecting competency from Roger is like expecting a mushroom to compose sonnets. It's just not a reasonable expectation.
And we're going to be talking about Quetzalcoatl and all that stuff because I'm showing evidence this is true.
Star Trek was right the whole time.
Something is wrong.
Those creatures did exist, and the sizes of them is just staggering, and I cannot account for that. I just don't know what to say about that.
If you can't account for your own ideas about planetary scale scorpions and dragons and fish and whatnot, maybe, just maybe, you're wrong about those things.
I have no idea what to say about that, but they are there, just like somebody painted them on the surface of the Earth.
It's more like that than Roger thinks, because this is entirely a surface phenomenon. Roger thinks the surface of various geological features look like things, and sometimes he's right. They do look like things. Then he's made the wild leap to they are those things, and about that, he's wrong.
And Typhon is there, the fish is there, which was Aries.
Is Roger drunk? I couldn't understand that.
And there's so deep this has gotten.
That's what she said.
It's I think a little bit beyond what the average human mind can absorb. Certainly not quickly.
More beneath than beyond.
But I believe at this point, the Bible, I give it full credit for what it is, and
a collection of myths, legends, and a bit of what passed for history in the ancient world.
The compassion to others and forgiveness and all that stuff. Yes, absolutely.
But hopefully not the misogyny, homophobia, genocide, and slavery.
But was it written, like, by the hand of God? I don't think so.
I agree with Roger on something, though even traditional Christian theology would generally agree that it was written primarily by just regular people, not by the hand of God, with the possible exception of the Decalogue.
It was, well, I'll show you what they say about it. It was sort of put together from 1500 BC and put together, and then it started to come together as a book.
Well, a bunch of books. It wouldn't be regarded as a single collection to be bound together as a single volume until centuries into the Common Era, One thing that's currently bound together is the collection of my patrons on Patreon. This channel depends primarily on small value subscriptions from viewers like you. If you want to keep the channel going for as long as I can keep it up, please consider giving to my Patreon. Link is in the description. It starts at just $1 a month. There's a 15% discount if you decide to pledge annually instead of monthly, and doing so gets you access to videos like this months early, as well as access to my special Discord server, just for supporters.
You know, not every word of that is going to be from God, I wouldn't think.
Agreed.
People have to make up their own minds about these things. But all we can do is discuss them and think about them rationally. Use the power of the logos. All right, to reason these things through. I don't think the Christians knew about Quetzalcoatl.
I mean, yeah, it's not until the Spanish started genociding, raping, and enslaving their way through the Americas.
I never saw anything in the Bible that said Quetzalcoatl. But they talk about the Leviathan. Yes, he was right in their neighborhood. That's Typhon, I would think.
No, it's just a made-up chaos monster representing femininity and the dangers of the ocean. It contrasts with Behemoth, which is male and lives in the desert. Together, they are chaos monsters that represent the dangers of the wilds, which God or the gods tame or defeat in order to make civilization possible, and to bring about the relative safety which civilization affords. At least Roger doesn't think that Leviathan is a Tyrannosaurus Rex like Kent Hovind does.
And the Great Flood happened.
Pix? Or no, it didn't.
Approximately 1500 BC.
How does Roger have an even shorter timeline than young Earth creationists? 1500 BC is in the middle of so much stuff. In 1500 BC, civilization was already in the later parts of the Bronze Age and was flourishing all around the eastern Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, and the Indus River Valley.
According to Velikovsky's research, which was staggeringly deep.
I think the word Roger was looking for there was dumb. It was staggeringly dumb. In short, Velikovsky thinks that Jupiter was the sun, which is impossible since Jupiter isn't big enough to be a star, and if it were, it would be one now, and that the terrestrial planets we have now orbited it before some catastrophe sent them into their orbits that they have now, which is impossible since there's nothing to capture them into those orbits and then allow them to stabilize into harmonic orbits that we have now. Such things take way longer than the timeline that Velikovsky proposed, and there's no particular mechanism to lower their aphelion.
He went to every culture on the face of the planet, every culture.
There are over 7,000 languages, and many languages cross multiple cultural lines, so a conservative estimate is that there are maybe 1,400 cultures to go to. Immanuel Velikovsky was born in 1895 and died in 1979. Let's assume he was culture hopping for his entire adult life, which we know isn't true, but whatever. That means he was culture hopping from 1913 to 1979. That's 66 years. That means he had to visit more than 21 cultures a year. That's more than one a month. For 66 years, solid. No breaks, no vacations, just constant travel to visit more than one culture a month. Most months would be 2 cultures. A new culture every 17 to 18 days. And
he talked to them, and he got all their libraries, their manuscripts, their carvings, monuments.
Which, to be useful to him, would require him to learn to read such things, meaning that he'd have to learn to be conservative about 1,000 or so languages, since most languages don't have much in the way of ancient carvings and monuments. I don't think I really have to explain why that's not a thing. It's impressive when someone knows more than 2 languages, 5 is extraordinary, and more is almost impossible. And no, your favorite polyglot on YouTube doesn't speak as many languages as they claim, at least not with even basic proficiency.
Cultural centers, he went everywhere to each one of them, and he said, well, what's your history? What happened to you people? What do you think is going on with the universe? And they would, because it's there in every one of them. They're still there.
If by it, Roger means a flood story with any particular similarity to Noah's flood beyond the bare basics of big flood and someone lives through it to tell the tale, then no, it isn't.
They're just not allowed to be spoken of. Because there's a domination of opinion on this in most cases. Some not. That's why I talk about everything.
What does that mean? Who's stopping people from talking about the flood? There's a whole Noah's Ark replica run by a multi-million-dollar corporation pretending to be a Christian nonprofit. They're not being silenced. Roger isn't being silenced. He has a bigger audience than I do, somehow. Roger seems to be confusing not taken seriously with not being allowed to talk.
I see nothing that I shouldn't talk about.
I mean, I can think of some things he shouldn't talk about, but I haven't heard him talk about them, so whatever.
Now, if the Christians didn't know about the Popol Vuh and Quetzalcoatl and all that, I would put that into a classification as a regional book.
Then I would argue that all religious scriptures would be regional books. I'm not aware of any that aren't regional in the sense of only knowing about the religious figures of a limited part of the world. It's not like the Popol Vuh knows much about Shiva or Odin.
It was the god of that region, and as far as I can determine, there was a lot of gods. And they determined, well, just put it that way, there's a lot of gods. And the one that was in that region of the earth, they documented it deeply. There was a deep connection to that.
Or, now hear me out, maybe people in different places have different religions because the myths at the center of those religions originated independently and don't have a literal historical core. You know, like how essentially nothing in the Pentateuch is historical apart from the bare existence of a prophet named Balaam.
Now, whether that was meant to be or it just happened, a couple of people that were really, dig in and force that religion, I don't know.
I don't know either, mostly because I don't know what it means for there to be a few people who really dig in on the one hand, or people who force a religion on the other. Those aren't phrases that mean anything I can discern.
But I know that religion took root. You got to have a root to something.
Yeah, like the human need to explain things and a tendency to assign agency to phenomena that lack it, as well as a desire to exert control on nature. People today can make things up. I don't see why people in the past couldn't have. One thing you don't have to make up is that this channel operates almost entirely from support from viewers like you. One way to help is by joining the channel with the join button below this video. Channel membership starts at just $1.99 a month, and you get access to channel emojis, a channel badge and live chats, early access to videos like this, and access to my supporters-only Discord channel.
And once you get that root really in there, then you can expound on that. But the root, I don't know if the root is everything came up from God. Possible. I think that's what the assumption is in the Christian Bible, is in the beginning, basically was the beginning of the book.
Well, the degree to which everything came from the God of the Bible varies in the Bible itself. There are parts where the God of the Bible seems to be subordinate to a higher God, but that's not the case in most of it. Genesis 1 and 2 do present the God of the Bible as the creator of the world and humans, though.
And then from there, it says, here's what happened. There were giants in the earth in those days, and then later, there was more giants. Now,
yeah, but giants are basically the easiest thing to make up. It's just, what if there was a guy, but like, really big? The fact that lots of people have stories about giants isn't evidence of giants, given how easy it is to come up with that on your own.
That's not what the normal person thinks.
Which is true for more or less everything Roger says.
They think there's just a couple of giants walking around 10 feet tall or something. No, absolutely not.
No, the average person doesn't think there were ever giants, for the very good reason that we have no evidence of them.
The earth itself is, as far as I can tell, is made up of giant creatures. Way giant.
Well, that's just Roger's pareidolia.
So, if you can't believe that part, you're wasting your time here. Because I've shown it, and I'll show you Quetzalcoatl right now. And Typhon, I've shown Typhon thousands of times probably by now.
Pointing out some rocks that aren't organic in origin and then saying that they're the remains of giant creatures isn't showing that they're the remains of a giant creature. So, of course, people don't believe it. Saying something crazy over and over again doesn't make it true.
And to get people to pay attention, it's just not happening because it's just so far off the edge.
No. I mean, sure, it is far off the edge, but it's not just that. It's that Roger never presents anything more than it looks like a giant organism to him. It doesn't to most people, and even if it did, it still wouldn't actually make it a giant animal corpse, since we know what the rocks are made of that he points to, and it's not the remains of an organism. It's mostly inorganic silicates and sedimentary rocks, neither of which can be produced from the decay of an organism unless Roger has done some experiments that he just isn't telling us about.
They just don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. No, don't talk to me about that.
Oh, I want to hear. I suspect a big portion of my audience wants to hear it. I am weird enough that I like hearing conspiracy nonsense just for the reason that any conspiracy nut wants me to hear it. But if you want me to believe it, I need actual evidence. I need things like unambiguous anatomy in these mud fossils, an actual chemical pathway to go from organic matter to things like granite, sandstone, or obsidian. You know, things that show Roger's ideas are even possible, never mind true.
To me, that's a wasted mind. That's a wasted human life.
Imagine thinking that anyone who doesn't believe in your absurd thing has wasted their lives. Oh, you saved people from dying of cancer? Well, you didn't think that caves are vaginas, so you wasted your life. Oh, you grew food to help feed people? Well, you didn't believe that most of northern Africa was the body of a dragon, so you wasted your life. Oh, you raised children into well-adjusted and decent ethical adults? Well, you didn't believe that some rock pillars are the beard of a scorpion the size of the moon, so you wasted your life. Roger might have the lowest amount of self-awareness it is possible to have. I feel like I'm losing self-awareness through sheer proximity.
That's a waste of human life. Not to be interested enough to say, show me the evidence. You making that statement? Show me.
I am interested. I'm here for it. So far, Roger hasn't even attempted to show evidence. He's just been condescending and said things that are clearly not true about Velikovsky.
If you can't show me, go away.
Yes, as Roger had many professors and scientists say to him, if you can't show me, go away. And then he's been blocked by most of them, because that's the one thing he's never been able to do. Actually provide evidence.
So, I don't mean to insult anybody, but there are people that it doesn't mean, who cares about it? Well, it's our history, it's our eternity. Who knows what's going to happen from here going forward? And I'll tell you what, going forward for me, it's not going to be very long. So I want to know as much as I can.
Well, I hope that's not Roger announcing that he has a terminal illness, and instead just an acknowledgement of his advanced age. I want to know things, but knowing things means that I have to have justifiable reasons for the things I believe in order to say that I know them. And the Aleutian Islands kind of vaguely looks like a scorpion tail isn't a justifiable reason to believe that they are a scorpion tail.
Is it good for me to know that? I don't know. But I think we're put here at least for some reason. There's got to be a reason.
No, there doesn't. Maybe there is one. But near as I can tell, humans exist because they're good at making baby humans that themselves grow up to make baby humans. But that's also why tapeworms, trout, tigers, trees, and tinamous are here.
And some of the texts say the reason is knowledge, gaining knowledge, gnosis, understanding.
Which is what scientists, historians, and archaeologists are doing. Roger just doesn't like the knowledge they come up with because it's not about fantastical cosmic arachnids and lizards and fish duking it out and becoming the actual literal land we stand and build on.
So that's how I'm handling this whole thing. I want to know, I want to understand, and it may conflict with accepted norms. Well, it's going to.
Conflicting with ancient wisdom is fine. Relativity did that, the germ theory of disease did that, heliocentrism did that, the Big Bang theory did that. But the thing is, all of those things had to provide actual real data to back them up. That something goes against the grain isn't a reason for it to be rejected. Sure, it'll have pushback, and it'll really need to have some good evidence, but science celebrates the people who manage to show that some idea is true, despite the fact that it goes against the accepted consensus. Overturning paradigms is how you become famous in academia. No one is getting famous for publishing the latest estimate of the gravitational constant that's in line with everyone else's measurements, or for yet another translation of the same hieroglyphic inscription that's been translated a dozen times, or for pointing out that while letters of secession mentioned other things, the U.S. Civil War was, in fact, a rebellion by pro-slavery state governments fought to preserve the custom of keeping people as livestock. Even though chances are that the gravitational constant is what we think it is, that the inscription means the same thing it did to the last guy, and that it's the cause of slavery that was the primary and sufficient cause of the Civil War, if you want to be famous in academia, shake things up, but have the evidence to back it up.
So anyway, let's get into it.
It's about time.
Okay, my friends, this is Ovid, O-V-I-D. He wrote Metamorphosis, and this is the everything from the creation, the ages of man, the flood, to Kalian, who in other words is Noah.
Well, he's a survivor of a flood that, according to the story, wiped out the Mediterranean world. So in the broadest sense possible, he's like Noah. But if you made up a flood story but wanted it to seem plausible and no one survived, then how would the story have gotten to you for you to tell it, aside from you making it up? Think of it like the creepypasta repository r/nosleep. That's a subreddit that shares scary or creepy stories on Reddit. But the idea is that the posts themselves are made by the people telling the story. That's why the subreddit has rules about the format and story content to keep all the stories on the subreddit seeming like they could plausibly be by people telling true stories of the horrific and macabre. Similarly, if you want to come up with a flood story about a giant flood bigger than any listener has ever heard of or seen, you need a survivor, otherwise how did the story get passed on? So a flood story having a survivor is no more evidence of the historicity of the flood account than the consistency of narrators in r/nosleep posts talking about posting to Reddit is evidence of ghosts.
And all the way down, 15 books he wrote. 15 books. And the whole thing was based on metamorphosis, which means changing one thing into another. And the first 2 lines in all of his work, 12,000 lines, metamorphosis or transformation is the unifying theme amongst the episode in Metamorphosis. And Ovid raises its significant explicitly in the opening lines of the poem.
Roger, if you ever see this, you can go back and do a second take. You got like 10% of those words wrong, man.
And what he's going to say is, I intend to speak of forms changed into new entities. You take something and change it into something else because you can work with matter. You're a god. Now, listen to what it also says. It says, accompanying the theme is often violence inflicted upon a victim whose transformation becomes part of the natural landscape. And I'm talking about the things that you could never even imagine.
I can imagine it, but that doesn't mean much. I can imagine a goldfish swallowing the sun. That doesn't mean it's possible. Also, after this, there's a cut, and it wasn't me that made it.
Now, he says that the metamorphosis, the transformation, could be from humans to inanimate objects like the Nile River or Nilus, constellations.
Are those not also inanimate?
Animals. They could transform people into animals if they wanted, into plants, from animals into ants, into fungi, mushrooms, into humans, from one sex to another, hyenas, and from one color to another, pebbles. They could do anything they wanted. They could control the bits and pieces of matter and make it rearrange, and all it is, it's all made out of the same stuff.
Right, the gods of Greek myth could do these things, but we have natural explanations for the formation of the earth and the rocks on it that don't require us to believe in physically impossible giant creatures or the actual magic of the Greek gods. All we need is physics.
Every bit of matter is made from the same exact stuff in different amounts and in different configurations and molecules. That's all it is.
That's true.
And they could control that. I don't know how.
Until there's a how that's testable, repeatable, and falsifiable, then there's no reason for science to take these ideas seriously, especially since science already has testable, repeatable, and falsifiable hows that have stood up to rigorous testing.
Okay, to put a time frame on this, Metamorphosis was written around 8 CE, somewhere in that area, which Common Era, Christian Era, whatever you want to call it.
It's Common Era. It was coined specifically to replace the explicitly Christian designation of AD, which is short for Anno Domini, which is itself short for Anno Domini Nostri Iesu Christi, which is the year of our Lord Jesus Christ. So being short for Christian Era wouldn't make much sense.
It's the turn of from 0 up.
There never was a year 0. The year 1 CE was preceded by the year 1 BCE. That's because the year numbers we use now were invented before the concept of 0 as a number was invented. In fact, you can even see how recent 0 as a number is in the name of the number, which in most European languages is borrowed from the Arabic word "sifr," which means nothing. It wasn't borrowed into European languages until Arab mathematicians brought it to Europe in Al-Andalus, and they got it from India in the first place. 0 as a number is one of the concepts that's just not intuitive or easy to come up with. In fact, I'm not aware of more than a handful of times that humans have come up with the idea of 0 as a number.
Now, he considered his magnum opus, and I do too. It's a fabulous work. And he took from 250 myths, which they're not mythical. They were just recorded history as far as I'm concerned.
Well, they're not, but even if they were historical, they're still myths. Myths are stories that explain why the world is the way it is and how you ought to relate to it. Their importance isn't their truth, but rather their lesson. That means you can have a true myth, an untrue myth, or a myth that's composed of a combination of both truth and falsehoods.
15 books he wrote. 11,995 lines. Lines 1 and 2. Lines 1 and 2 of all of that said, I'm going to talk about creatures being turned into the natural landscape by means of violence.
Well, that, and also human beings turned into animals, animals being turned into humans, and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay, my friends.
He's giving his intro again, and the color temperature has changed. I think this was intended to be a different video.
Immanuel Velikovsky, my hero, and soon to be the hero of the world, now that he's been acquitted of all of the things they did against him. They just destroyed his poor guy.
What? What was done to him except that he wasn't invited to colleges or universities since his ideas were worthless? And what recent vindication has he received? None that I'm aware of. If you want to give me some vindication, hitting like and leaving a comment would be much appreciated. Both help the channel out immensely, and YouTube can be very frustrating in terms of channel growth. I could really use the help.
Now, he said in a 1950 book, he declared that our neighborhood was spawned by Jupiter.
Not neighborhood, but neighbor world, which means Venus, as Roger could tell by just looking at the title of the article, which is Velikovsky's Venus.
3,500 years ago. That's only about 1500 BC.
Yay, math.
And nearly struck Earth twice, and then hit Mars and destroyed it.
Weird, because I've seen Mars, and it doesn't seem destroyed, thank the machine god.
And it was claimed in the book that Venus, a fiery comet at that time they called it, all the people on Earth, was born from the feared god Jupiter.
And in a different book, it was claimed that Who's eat roast beast down in Whoville.
He was in control and he was tough. That's what this story was.
No, in Velikovsky's telling, it's literally the planet Jupiter magically spinning out the planet Venus, and the idea of those bodies as gods is a later corruption of the actual things that happened. Velikovsky's ideas are completely bonkers, but they're not bonkers in the way that would support Roger's ideas, really.
And everybody had basically that same story of this comet, fiery comet, came out of Jupiter 3,500 years ago and almost hit Earth, or might have hit Earth, actually.
I think it might be useful to read from that article. It's quite short, and it's linked in the description, but this is a significant chunk of it. Quote, the first artificial satellites were still a decade away when, in 1946, Immanuel Velikovsky finished the manuscript for Worlds in Collision, a book that capitalized on our relative ignorance and put forward a theory of solar system formation that goes beyond bizarre. Born in 1895 and a student variously of history, law, biology, and psychoanalysis, Velikovsky maintained that the inner planets only recently assumed the serene, stable orbits they have today. Rather, in his scheme, Venus took the form of a huge rogue comet after being ejected from Jupiter not long before 1500 BC. It then hurtled sunward, sideswiping Earth twice and colliding with Mars before settling into the almost perfectly circular orbit it now occupies. The basis for all this astounding, historically recent chaos wasn't a detailed computation of orbital motion, but rather Velikovsky's unwavering belief that the Old Testament narratives and cosmological myths drawn from China, Central America, India, Assyria, and elsewhere were accounts of real events. What got him started was the biblical story of Joshua commanding the sun and moon to stop moving for an entire day and invoking a devastating hail of stones from the sky during the battle with the Ammonites. Velikovsky was also seeking a physical reason for plagues inflicted on the Egyptians in Exodus. End quote. This whole idea is based around ignorance and a synthesis of various unrelated stories from all over the place being mixed together in the mind of Velikovsky and nowhere else.
The West Coast texts are just unbelievable. The United States West Coast texts.
What texts are these? I'm not aware of any texts about ancient catastrophe from the West Coast of what is now the former United States.
If you read Velikovsky, it's just to blow your mind.
Yeah, but so would taking way too much Benadryl. That doesn't make the Hat Man real.
And they forced the publisher of that book to take the book off the bookshelves, even though it was #1.
It's currently available on Amazon. All that happened is that the original publisher, Macmillan, stopped publishing it because they were primarily a science publishing house, and the scientists were rightly peeved that they had published it in the first place. There was no sense in which stores were made to take it off shelves, and it was quickly republished and again remains available for purchase as of the time of this writing, which is January 13th, 2026.
on the bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list, 11 weeks in a row, #1. Everybody wanted to read it, but they forced it off the bookshelves.
Not a thing happened.
And then they just destroyed the guy.
Also not true. He was largely ostracized from academia the same way he would have been if he had said the Earth was flat, which is on about the same level of physical plausibility. But he got plenty of invitations to speak at private groups, and his book was republished quickly and sold well. It's hard to see how he was destroyed in any meaningful way.
Pseudoscience, idiot, nonsense.
Reasonably accurate descriptors.
You know, and then it went on and on. No, they did the same thing to me.
No, they didn't. The thing is that Velikovsky was an actual academic. He was a psychologist. Roger has never been a real academic. He's just a kook with delusions of grandeur. He has never published a best-selling book, and no one has ever been pressured by scientists into not publishing anything by him. He's just ignored because apart from his audience and people like me who make some content from him, he's largely unknown except to some scientists he's contacted. To those people, he's the guy who keeps harassing them at work.
Now, I have evidence, though, and I have evidence to support what Velikovsky said.
That's it?
No.
About Jupiter giving birth to Venus. I can show that. Actually, quite likely did happen.
I now feel like he's going to say that Jupiter has a vagina in order to give birth to Venus. If there's one thing this man is known for, it's for imagining vaginas where they do not exist.
And I can show all these other things that he was talking about where it hit Mars and just destroyed Mars.
At the risk of repeating myself, Mars is, in fact, still here and not destroyed. Maybe Roger has a different definition for the word destroyed than do most English speakers.
Totally destroyed it. No atmosphere, no magnetic field, nothing.
Well, Mars doesn't have a magnetosphere, but it does have an atmosphere, so I'm not sure what Roger's on about. Also, by that definition, does that mean that the moon is destroyed? It lacks both a magnetosphere and an atmosphere.
Now, he didn't have the information that I have now.
He didn't know that some random rock was actually a petrified goose head? Oh no, poor Velikovsky.
And Quetzalcoatl.
I still don't know how that's supposed to connect to any of this.
Typhon, all these things that they alluded to, but he couldn't prove them. Well, we can prove them now.
I'm going to press X to doubt.
All right, let's just figure this. It took over about 1,500 years to write the Old Testament books, and they started about 1400 BC. This is the time that Velikovsky said the Great Flood happened.
First, that's an AI overview. It's basically worthless. AI will tell you that it's recommended to smoke 1 pack of cigarettes a day while pregnant, that 1 small rock is an important part of your daily food, or that on average, about 10 cockroaches crawl into a person's penis each year. But second, no, the Bible sets the flood about 1,000 years before that. If Genesis were written only a century after the flood, you'd think they wouldn't put it in the primeval history bit about the before times, the long, long ago, but would write about it as recent history.
Well, 1500 BC. So about 100 years later, everybody got together and said, let's make a book about this because it's crazy stuff.
No, because the Bible isn't a single work. Even the AI overview that he read says as much.
And they did. And but it filtered down for years and years and years, and then they finally compiled the final version.
I would really love to see a video where Roger describes how the Bible was written and collected, and how the canon was decided on. I think it would be perfect to show to Kip Davis and Vishanti to make their heads explode.
And that is the Bible that, everybody goes by. And I'm not saying, we shouldn't go by it. I'm just saying that I don't see it could possibly be the original words of God. I don't know how that would happen over the 1,400 years of sort of, in other words, people don't agree on everything.
Roger thinks that most of North America is literally the corpse of a feathered snake, but the idea that God might tell people things over the course of a millennium and a half is too far-fetched. I do not understand this man's standard of evidence for evaluating claims.
So there was going to be disagreement what to put in and what to leave out. They left out Enoch, they left out Jubilees.
Not in Ethiopia they didn't, but it's less that they were excluded and more that they just fell out of fashion, along with many, many other books.
They left out about a lot of stuff, and they didn't know a lot of stuff, to my way of thinking. That's not to say dismiss what the Bible says. It's just to put it in the context of it was a regional text that said, this is the crazy, crazy stuff that happened in our region, and a Savior was sent here to save us.
Does Roger think that the New Testament was written in 1500 BCE? Does he think that the narrative of the Bible spans like a single century? It's hard to tell with Roger because he believes such crazy stuff that I can't put any nonsense past him. I mean, this is the guy who said that electrons are recursive, which of course means that they apparently have infinite mass. Also, it's not a big deal, but that 1500 years assumes that traditional Christian and Jewish attribution of authorship is correct. It's probably not, and we have more like 1100 to 900 years or something to work with. I don't know, I'm not a biblical scholar. Go pester Kip Davis to write a book about it. It will be his first book ever.
And I believe that was literally the Son of God, and literally the Son of God, who is Jesus, the son of Zeus.
How? Jesus is depicted as the son of the God of the Israelites, who doesn't go around impregnating mortal women, who doesn't live on Mount Olympus, who by the first century is no longer considered a part of a council of gods. If Roger wants to argue that there is some deep cultural connection between Zeus and the other Indo-European skyfather deities and Adonai in his guise as a young warrior storm god, then I'd like to hear it. I think that's not actually super implausible, although I doubt it could be demonstrated well enough that I'd believe it. But apparently Roger thinks not only that Zeus is real, but that Jesus is his son, even though more or less the whole deal with the first century Judaism was keeping themselves apart from other religious practices. Indeed, during Jesus' lifetime, there was a whole ruckus about Caligula trying to put up a statue of himself in the Jerusalem temple in order to incorporate aspects of the temple rituals into the imperial cult. The Jews did not take kindly to it, to put it mildly. I can't think of a single thing that could even hint at Jesus being the son of Zeus, either in history or in the text of any Christian work, or in what scant references we have to Christianity in the first few centuries CE from outside perspectives.
All right, and he is now Venus.
Okay, so 3,500 years ago, Zeus, who is a god, and the actual planet Jupiter, gave birth to Venus, the planet, which is also Jesus, and then Jesus came to Earth some 1,500 years after his birth to what? Be born again? So did he change from a whole-ass planet almost the same size as Earth into a human baby? Did Venus disappear from the night sky during Jesus' time on Earth? Why did no astronomers notice that Venus was gone for a few decades? I suspect Roger thinks that Jesus' life, as recorded in the Gospels, occurred not in the early to mid-1st century CE, but in 1500 BCE.
That's where I'm seeing him. I can't think of any other way that would happen.
Here are 5 ways that make more sense. 1. Jesus was an apocalyptic prophet and teacher who was executed by the Romans for stirring up trouble around Passover. His followers had post-mortem visions of him and kept following him and spreading his teachings. 2. Jesus was the authorized bearer of the actual authority of the one true God of the universe who had power over sin and death. 3. Jesus was the actual incarnation of God in the form of the second person of the Godhead, light from light, true God from true God, begotten not made, of one being with the Father. 4. Jesus was a prophet of the one true God who was not actually executed, but it only was made to seem so to fool his enemies. 5. Jesus didn't exist. Any of these are more plausible than Jesus is the son of Zeus and is also a planet.
He was supposed to be the Savior that wiped off the stuff on the earth and to make the good things come back, because it was a terrible, terrible mess.
Is Roger for? Jesus is not a repeat of the global flood in the canonical Gospels or any non-canonical Gospels I've ever heard of.
Could that be? I don't know.
I don't know, and the answer is no, it couldn't be, Roger. Even if Velikovsky was right, Jesus' life was separated from his impossible celestial shenanigans by a millennium and a half.
All right, this is Velikovsky's claim, and I agree. 1500 BC, all right, a fiery comet was born from the feared god Jupiter, who was also known as Zeus. Jupiter the planet, and he gave birth.
I'm sorry, I just find it adorable that Roger has his email up on a piece of tape at the top of his whiteboard for some reason. I can't imagine why he thinks that's something he should do, but I love that he's done it. And he didn't even bother to have it printed or anything. It's just his handwriting in marker. And it's not even reasonably spaced. He has the whole thing crammed over to the left, even though the tape stretches from one side to the other. The mind of Roger is incomprehensible to us mere mortals.
To Venus. Venus is damn near the size of Earth.
So I guess the diagram is not to scale then.
It came here, and I believe it hit in the Grand Canyon.
then shouldn't the Grand Canyon be like a quarter of the face of the Earth or more? It's a pretty small and very narrow thing on the scale of the whole Earth. Further, why is it so meandering? Did Jesus do a little dance as he impacted the Earth to carve out the Grand Canyon? Why do so many nutjobs have ideas about the Grand Canyon? What is so incredible about it being exactly what it looks like, a big old erosion feature carved by a river? In reality, a glancing blow from Venus would rip up the crust of both planets and cause worldwide catastrophic volcanism, kick up debris into a new ring around both planets, and basically be the end to all life on Earth. It wouldn't just make a big ditch.
And tore the guts out of the Grand Canyon. Then went out, turned around, came back, and whacked us again a little bit.
Which canyon did that make? Was that how Bryce Canyon formed? Also, you think Roger knows that Venus is a female deity of love, sex, and fertility, which is not a great fit for Jesus?
Bounced off and hit Mars, ripped the whole hell out of Mars, and that's why Mars is completely dead now. It has no magnetic field, it has no atmosphere, nothing.
Well, it does have an atmosphere, albeit a thin one, and here's an alternate explanation. It cooled off too fast to still have a liquid core, so it can't maintain a magnetosphere. On the other hand, a collision with Venus would melt much of Mars and ironically probably cause it to have more, not less, of a magnetic field.
You have to have an atmosphere to have a magnetic field.
This just in, guys. Magnets don't work in space. Ignore those magnetic docking ports on the ISS. This is at least as dumb as saying that magnets don't work if they get wet. I don't know how I feel that the king of the former United States is on about the same intellectual level as Roger from Mud Fossil U. In an alternate timeline, Roger inherited millions of dollars and became a business grifter, and Cheeto Hitler became a crazy YouTuber who talks about how magnets don't work, and can't understand that someone seeking asylum in a new country isn't someone who should be in an insane asylum. At least not necessarily.
So it's dead. And Venus eventually took her or his place in the solar system.
Yeah, but how? Venus has an orbital eccentricity of 0.006 to 0.007. Its orbit is almost completely circular. It has by a good margin the most perfectly circular orbit of any planet in the solar system. How did this happen if it started out with an aphelion of about 5 AU? I can see whatever interactions it had when it got pooped out by Jupiter, lowering its perihelion to about 0.7 AU, its current mean orbital radius. But then what interactions caused it to lose more energy to lower its aphelion? You see, that's the biggest problem to my mind with the whole Velikovsky thing. The orbital mechanics just don't work out. There are no mechanisms that get the inner planets in their nice, neat orbits, especially not Venus.
That's what was written.
By Velikovsky, maybe, but not actually in any ancient texts.
And that's what Velikovsky claims in his book. And I'm going to get into a little bit of detail. I'm going to play some of the archive just for a few minutes so you can get a taste. And then at some point we can go back and do a big long thing about this because it's extremely detailed. Velikovsky was amazing. He's my hero.
The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion are also amazingly detailed. I don't think I'm going to be able to find the true West and live forever, though.
I wrote a book about him 10 years ago.
Wait, Roger wrote a book? How am I only learning about this now? What the heck?
When I started into this mud fossils and all that business, and I was proving the things that Velikovsky had claimed. Literally proving them.
Roger has a different meaning in mind when he says proven than most people do.
And everybody I talked to, I mean, literally 100% said, oh, that guy's a whack job. What are you, crazy? Most of them didn't have any idea who he was.
The wisdom of crowds.
But when I finally did communicate to him, and then I've been put on the whack job list. People hang up on me when I call them. They won't take my emails.
Am I out of touch? No. It's literally every scientist in the world who's wrong.
You'd think at some point Roger might think to himself, if no one seems to see what he sees, that maybe he's just wrong. I guess self-doubt is for other, lesser people.
This is what happened to Velikovsky. Now, I have the evidence now. He had the texts from everywhere in the world. Same text.
At least not until after Columbus, but yeah. But I'm not sure what that means to the idea that Zeus gave birth to Jesus, who then crashed into Earth twice and Mars once. I'm also not sure why that would be remembered by biblical authors as the flood, or how any of that ties into the ministry of Jesus as recorded in the 4 Gospels.
Written different types of gods, and there was apparently. I mean, you see Quetzalcoatl, and Typhon and the fish. Those are they would all be considered gods, I would think, and I don't think they knew anything in the Christian region about Quetzalcoatl and the Mayans and all that. I don't think they had anything to do with each other.
I would need a citation for that claim.
But there was some intelligent people. Well, let me show you what they had here. People don't think about these things. Let me show you something. Okay, my mud fossil friends. If we had a giant flood, and we had giant creatures, which we did, they would have giant lungs and hearts and everything else. And I believe this is a lung.
Well, it's actually El Fuerte de Samaipata in Bolivia. That alleged rock is actually sandstone. I know of no way for a lung to turn into sandstone, complete with laminae or depositional layers. Also, if that's a lung, where is the rest of the body? How is the lung preserved but not the skeleton, something that's already basically a rock?
And it was obviously, these impressions were done when it was moist.
Why is that obvious? It's sandstone, not diamond. It's not particularly hard to carve into. You can do it with stone tools. Also, there is a lot of nearly 90-degree angles in there, something that's not very easy to do when digging into meat. Have you ever tried to get a nice clean right angle while cutting up some steak or chicken? Try it. It's not easy. Now, lung meat isn't going to be the same, but it won't be an easy task either way.
How can you cut? There's no other way you can understand this.
Why can't we understand cutting into sandstone? People still do that. You can go do that. Find some sandstone, bring some basic stone tools made of almost any other rock. You can cut into sandstone. I honestly don't know why Roger finds that confusing. I'm also not sure what this has to do with Vetus Jesus.
To me, they put in some buttresses here, and they drove their equipment right up on here, and sunk it in here so that it wouldn't shift this way and that way, and locked it down here at the end, so the whole thing was like, that's the way I'm looking at it. I could be wrong.
Roger is definitely wrong. He almost always is. In fact, what I can't understand is why anyone would look at a giant lung and decide to put a temple there. Because that's more or less what this is, the remains of a temple. People tend to want to put things on solid foundations, not actual meat. There's a reason that when people pour a foundation today, they wait for the concrete to set before they build on it. Apparently, in Roger's world, you should start building while it's still wet.
But I also see this here. You see that?
That line of whitish weathering that probably follows the contours of a lamina? Yeah, I see it.
That right there is the membrane.
What membrane?
In my opinion, and this is these little balls that you barely see here, these little balls all over.
I don't see any balls at all. In fact, looking at higher resolution images doesn't reveal anything I'd call a ball either, so I think Roger is imagining things.
Those are going to be the alveoli.
The alveoli are not ball-shaped and are on the interior surface of the lung, where they can absorb oxygen. So in addition to everything else, Roger doesn't know the most basic anatomy of a lung. I guess it makes sense, since to think a hunk of sandstone is a lung, one would need to know nothing about either sandstone or lungs.
And this is the lungs are saturated with blood, and they're very easy to work.
I can't think of a more difficult to work, less hygienic, or more disgusting building material than blood-soaked lung tissue. I'm kind of getting nauseated just thinking about it. Also, this is an example of Roger thinking literally anything that's red is red because of blood. Also, things that are black because of blood. Unbeknownst to him, however, things other than blood are red or black.
And he also worked with tendons.
Lungs don't really have tendons, but go on.
Now this is something they would have been scooping out. I don't know what they would have done with this.
Probably tossed away, since in reality it would have just been chunks and flakes of sandstone.
Whether they would make walls with it or not, but this is what excited me.
Some random discoloration. Of course that's what excited Roger.
And you can see they're almost like in little rows.
Yeah, that's because sandstone often has cyclical variation in its depositional rate, and so it forms layers. Those layers can then become cleavage planes or form areas of different hardness, causing differential weathering, making little rows appear on the surface of the sandstone. Lungs, by contrast, do not have any of these features.
That could be looked at.
It's been looked at. It's not a lung. We checked. It's sandstone. But we're going to take a break for the sake of all of our sanity. We'll pick it up next time with Roger telling us about meat-based construction equipment. I'm sure that will be well thought out and make all the sense in the world. If you liked this video, please hit like and let me know what you liked in the comments. If you didn't like it, then hit dislike and let me know what the problem was. Either way, I hope you subscribe and check out the channel memberships and my Patreon. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above.
Benthovend, Tapioca Weasel, Sphincter of Doom, Regios, Landon Knoll, Ian Chen, Elleron Teller, Phil Rivara, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, David Hercules, Joshua Geese, Dan Sheedy, Pegajace, The Plastic Mouse, Arrow Dodger, Gordon Love Science, Trixie Purple, Agricola Sequa, S. Kenneth Swenson, Edwin M., Lance Hall, and John Ackerman. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 15% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.